Okay, meeting can order. Public comment on non-agenda items. Is there anyone that wants to address the board? Seeing none. Approval of the minutes.
Are we
We can't do that though.
Yeah,
I think.
because I'm the only one who.
You're the only one, because I wasn't here.
And neither is Sandra, so.
I don't know how we do that.
Do we just accept, we just like accept
We
it?
table it to the next meeting, I believe?
Well, we don't have enough
Right
people
now.
that were at the meeting to know. We don't have a quorum of members that will ever be here.
Can we just accept it as, I don't know, we did this happened once before, and I
Did it?
can't remember what we did
We
now.
can find out the official procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah, why don't we
can do
find
that
out?
the
I don't
next
know
meeting.
what,
I'll make
so
a
we'll
note.
just have to wait on that. Check.
We did something with this before,
Okay.
and I just can't remember what it was.
So we're at Seraphian Building update.
All right, go
Okay,
ahead,
oh,
Richard.
okay.
It's your show.
All right, so Seraphian, we're in the phase 2 construction. We finished demolition, moved to phase 2 construction. We're moving right along. There is a detailed breakdown with a couple pictures that are on the handout today. All 5 levels are being worked. The interior framing and mechanical, electrical, and plumbing infrastructure is all going in. We have had a couple hiccups that are worth noting. One is the exterior envelope. The details have gone back and forth between the manufacturer, the designer, and the contractor, and that's going to end up causing a delivery delay. We're supposed to be resolving it in this next week.
You said this was the what?
The exterior, what we call the exterior envelope.
What is the exterior envelope?
Okay, so that would be basically, think about the exterior, in this case, we use a Den's glass. So it's basically the exterior, if in an old school building would be the stucco.
Okay.
So since it's a designed component and it has certain movement joints for seismic and for expansion, what was detailed from the designer was not in enough detail with the window systems. So it goes back and forth between the actual manufacturer and the designer to come up with joints that will work with the windows and the seismic considerations. And then that all has to get mocked up into a temporary or a submittal and approved, and then they go ahead and start doing it.
Okay, so there's, forgive the simplicity, there's walls and there's windows.
Correct.
Okay. Sounds like the problem is where the walls meet the windows. No, not exactly.
That's one of the problems,
That's
yes.
one of the problems, okay.
And then
The other problem is the material that the wall is made of.
correct is, and it needs to have, just like we do, think about sidewalks, and every 10 feet you have an expansion joint.
Yes.
Same thing with the building. We can't just have a giant panel of exterior cladding. It ends up getting cut up into smaller sections. So that's what they're working on, is all the details for those joints, because they end up getting, basically there's a metal joint that goes in between the panels, so to speak.
So those, that material that the walls are made of sounds like it's, what kind of material is it? Let me just ask that open-ended question briefly. I don't mean to go too long.
Yeah, super
But-
fantastic new modern stuff. So,
Okay, that's probably an answer I can understand.
so it's not like the old days where it was a cement-based plaster and then multiple coats with a stucco finish. It's a engineered material that they're using on most high-rise and exterior or commercial buildings. Den's Glass is one of the manufacturers, and it's kind of we have it on lot 4 and 5 also. So it's a man-made material, and it basically looks like foam, and then they spray a texture on it. And there's a whole waterproofing process that goes on behind that.
So when I drive by buildings and you see this purple or,
There you go, the new fantastic super,
that's what you're
Material.
talking about,
the purple stuff.
the purple stuff.
Sometimes it's yellow.
Sometimes it's yellow,
but
yes.
That's what we're talking about.
And then there's a coating that goes over it.
Correct. And to keep the building waterproof, this is what we're working on, is all the details, because that's not really a waterproofing material. The waterproofing is behind it. And then so all the drip channels and the expansion joints all are an integrated system to make sure the building is waterproof. So that's what we've been struggling with.
Okay. Wow, that's a learning experience for me.
So the next one that we're struggling over is also the roof detail. So the roof, there was a number of details on the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing drawings. Once we built out the building and started looking at all these utilities and then going through the roof and sitting on the roof, we've had a number of RFIs from the contractor, and we just recently had to pour another mechanical curb for the equipment to sit on, so that there was a detailed snafu there that's also impacting the project.
If you could go back in time and do something different to help prevent this problem from happening, what would that be? I mean, this is a function of the engineers that are working for the architects, correct? To
Yes. So
plan that out properly for clear guidance?
So typically, what I've seen in the industry and what we have done at other school districts is you have an internal constructability review unit. So the architect comes up with a series of plans and they submit them to the district at certain points in the delivery, right? 60%, 80%. And what happens is the critical components are looked at by staff, and they look at it from a maintenance and operations standpoint, and then they also just do it, it's basically a peer review. This project, we inherited this project, was at 65 to, I think it was 65% when I came in 2018. It was already way down the pipe. There was no, I don't know if there was a review process being, or any kind of guidance given by previous staff members. So we had a project basically, I think, that was going in, I misspoke, it was farther than 65% because we were going into DSA. So, I mean, that's way far downstream for us to come up with any design guidance from an owner standpoint. The other issue that was going on here was it was a state-funded replacement project, so there was a lot of like, hey, it's got to go in this certain way and it's got to go in a certain time period or we might lose funding. So, whereas we would like to have maybe taken and done a constructability review on this project before we actually put it out to bid, and we were unable to do it.
So what I find interesting, and obviously we're not alone in this, and I've experienced this too, we take architectural plans, and then I'm assuming they're working with a slew of engineers to figure out these kinds of issues, and they come up with this plan to which we submit to professional architects of the state to be reviewed and designed by all these very specific people, and it all gets stamped off, and then you get to the construction, and boom, we have these problems.
Sure. So
I mean,
you've got to remember the state. The state is only looking at a very narrow lane here. The state, when it goes to the state, they're looking at fire life safety, access compliance, and structural components. The big three we call them, right? They're really not looking at utility overlays. They're not looking at any building modeling. They just want to make sure that the foundation and the structure of the building are seismically safe. They want to make sure that there's adequate fire systems in place, and they want to make sure that it's accessible. Whether it is built like a pyramid or a square, or if the utilities line up or not, that's really not the state's purview. That's
Okay.
where we do our due
their
diligence.
state. So I guess what I'm thinking in my mind is, I don't know that I would expect you, I mean, this is your line of work, so maybe some level, obviously, of expertise here. But it seems like that's why you hire this architect, and that's why they select their engineers, and that they ultimately should be responsible to have these issues resolved for us. And I know that, you know, you can start digging a hole and you run into something you didn't know was there, and
Sure.
that's not anybody's problem, it just happens. But if I hire you, and I'm not sure, I can't remember who the architect is on this one, and their engineering team to answer these things for us and come up with this plan, it seems like there should be some obligation on their part to resolve these things, short of us going back for whatever the construction term is, you owe us because you goofed. I can't remember, there's a
Errors and omissions.
errors and omissions, there's a nice construction term for that, but, anyway, and I'm not,
That is the expectation, that you're
Right.
hiring a professional firm and that they are going to give you a set of drawings that can be constructed.
I mean,
With
because
minimal amount of change orders and minimum.
you're a
amount of
professional,
costs.
but you got a million things you're doing in your, you know, you're the general for this. And we're hiring the specialist that specializes in this kind of buildings to give us the, you know, like a doctor, you know, you're our generalist, and then you send us off to all the specialists that are, we go to get whatever detail thing it is, overseeing the big thing, and that's the way. So I guess I'm making a note that maybe we should think about a different architectural firm or something if they don't, like, make good on some of these kinds of issues. And I realize there's always some kinds of issues. But when you mention the roof, I mean, I'm like, okay, we gotta be able to get the roof done. I mean, I'm
It's-
just thinking.
Yeah, let me put it this way, the actual structural components of the roof are fine, it's just how much mechanical equipment ended up there. And there was a lot of activity, with that being a science building, there's a lot of exhaust fans coming up. There's a lot of things happening on that roof. It is, you can kind of see, it probably doesn't give you a lot of understanding of what's still left to come, but the picture down in the right-hand corner shows some of the mechanical air handlers have been placed, and there's a lot of, you'll see columns there. Those are all going to get ducts on them. So I mean, at the end of the day, when someone's trying to model this and figure everything out, it does get extremely complex. But again, to your
Which
point,
is why
we
you
pay
go to
the
a specialist, you know, that is supposed to know science buildings and does this, and they've done a few, and, you know, deal with these things.
Yeah.
I have a couple. Oh, sorry, Richard, if you had a thought first.
No. Well, we can. I was going to try to move us
Okay, I mean,
onto some good news.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Well,
can-
I think, you know, I noticed obviously the next thing on this is that the substantial completion date has been moved back from, what, I think it was July 24th the last time we had a committee meeting, to October 24, which appears to me to be quite a jump there. Is that because of the exterior envelope and those pieces, or were there other things?
those are contributing factors. The other one is mainly our electrical switchgear is on, I think, on the following bullet point. Electrical transformer and switchgear was scheduled for February of 24, and now it's coming in at baseline. It's now scheduled for February of 24. The baseline schedule reflected it coming in last month of 23. So we've basically lost almost 6 months on the gear. Now, that doesn't mean electrical is stopped.
Right.
They're still running all the conduits and everything back to the main rooms. It just means that we won't get that gear. Sometimes that gear is so large that it's usually placed before we build the walls in. And sometimes you have to order it, and that's something we're having some partnering meetings this week with the internal team, and then first week of October we're going to be meeting with PCL to kind of partner and work out some of these problems. But sometimes they bring in a knockdown unit. In other words, it comes in pieces,
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
now it's just the gear came, but we have to disassemble it to get it in this mechanical or electrical room, and then reassemble it, and then start landing the wires.
Sure. That's
So,
helpful.
I will not know until January, what we're looking like.
Okay.
So we had originally reported out that we were hoping for a fall of '24,
Right.
substantial completion and basically soft opening with programming in spring of '25. I won't know if that's feasible for another couple months.
Okay.
So we will have a good idea in January, and what I've told the team is that I need a year. It takes us, we program a year out on academics, so I need a year, kind of like, are we gonna make it or not? So I think right now, we're still trying to hold. The contractor may try to come back and ask for an accelerated schedule to meet those milestones. And that will be another internal discussion, because as soon as we do that, then we're looking at a cost impact.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of, so two things, one, obviously, one, have a substantial completion and soft opening next year is of, special significance, I think, to the campus. At the same time, obviously, any of the kind of change orders and things like that, those are inevitable. I'm not questioning the fact that we have to do those. But I would be curious to see maybe in a future meeting, or even just via what the amount of change orders that we've conducted for Seraphian. Not that any of that was not necessary, but just purely interested in kind of what the
In
scope.
total.
Yeah,
Because I know we report them actually at each board.
Broken
meeting, but
up.
They're broken
Exactly.
up. Based on, sure,
Because we've
no problem.
approved it, but I
Yeah.
think I'd be curious to see what it looks like compared to what we had anticipated and what we are. And we never know what else is going to come down the next year. But just so far, where we are.
I think we could easily get that and then send an email to the
That'd be great.
Yeah, so we are working on a couple issues that are going to be change orders. In fact, the contractors submitted, they have submitted one, and they're anticipating 2 additional time and impact schedules. And one of them is this exterior envelope and roof. Mechanical coordination is holding them up on what we would call critical path.
Yeah.
We know from supply chains, there's certain things that are outside of our control that obviously the switch gear is delayed 6 months.
Yeah.
And what the team's job is to make sure the contractor doesn't necessarily mean, just because it's 6 months delayed, we all look at milestones and overlays, doesn't mean they just automatically get 6 more months, right? There could be concurrent activities happening, which means really, okay, that piece of equipment's delayed 6 months, but that really only means a time impact on the full schedule for 3 months,
Sure.
let's say.
Sure.
So we're constantly working that through the team in the background. There were some district-initiated change orders that the contractor has submitted for compensation on. One was we were going for a standardized fire alarm system within the campus, because we're doing a campus wide now that we have the bond. So we wanted to make sure we were looking forward, and we initiated that change order. There is, like I said, the time impacts that they're looking at that we're trying to vet out, and then just some various small change orders. The big one that I'm seeing right now is this first time impact, where they're actually saying that it's going to impact the project by 180 days, which is 6 months. And it's a very large number. So that we're going to vet that out. Is it really 180 days? Because I understand that there is overhead concerns.
Right.
The longer the project, they bid it for a certain amount of time. And if you remember, this project bid, well, you probably weren't.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah.
So this project bid twice, and PCL actually lowered their bid by $1 million the second time. So there's a lot of things floating out there on the table. So I've got a set of plans that the contractors looked at twice and lowered the price by $1 million. And now I'm finding some discrepancies or some problems within the plans. So it's a little challenging. But things are going well. We've had a couple Division of State Architect issues on some acid waste piping and some hangers that we worked through, mainly with the subcontractors and the submittals. So all in all, the actual construction is going well. There are going to be some impacts. There are going to be some change orders. Right now, we're well within the 10% contingency. I don't know if we will get to the 10% contingency, but that's what the team's working on, is to make sure that all of those change orders are legitimate and an industry cost
Who's the architect?
It was GKK Works got taken over by Canon, so now it's Canon. Canon is the architecture.
Cannon, like a cannon?
Double A. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, they,
I remember JKK words.
Yeah. So, and then the other thing on top of this, well, that was probably way too much information, but the original architect that started it through GKK Works has retired. So the whole team that's
Yeah.
taking it over, kind of like Candace and I,
Yeah.
we're parachuting into the middle of this thing.
Yeah.
And so there's some things that might have been easily answered by that original architect, like, oh yeah, that's right, a couple things on the thing, that the new team is having to go back. They are putting they are responsive, John, so they are putting resources. In fact, I think one of the principals of the firm in the Los Angeles area is actually stepping in as the architect. They are still looking for an architect that's taking him away from a lot of stuff. But
I mean,
Well,
you're,
okay, I'm sorry.
no, I was just saying that that bid that you're talking about, the 1 million less than, I mean, it makes me glad that we approved the alternate delivery methods now for future projects,
I was
because that
gonna
seems like,
Share back to maybe Trustee Martin's
Yeah.
original point, what is the way in which we can kind of mitigate this going forward? One is
design build.
yeah,
design build. Second is both Richard and I are working really strategically on our staffing sort of program management team and what teams need, what we need to support this work going forward,
mhm,
so that we have these sort of quality checks on our side and the ability to give some feedback early and often. But yes, the new
yeah,
delivery methods are certainly going to assist in us catching these pieces much earlier.
God, I hate to use a cliche remark, but you get what you pay for, right? It may cost us more on design build, but we're getting that collaboration with an architect and a builder a lot sooner in the project, which should have come up to, hey, we wouldn't be going into a problem or be in a
Sure.
project with the exterior envelope or the
Yeah.
roofing. You know,
Yeah.
because it's gonna be oh, wait a minute, hey, drive it and we gotta do this, the purple stuff doesn't work, we need the yellow stuff.
sure,
You know, that's what you hope for in design build.
sure,
I just conclude by saying that obviously there's always some issues. Anything this magnitude, there's going to be issues. I'm disappointed that some of those issues seem to be what I would consider to be the basics. You know, how the walls go together or meet the roof, or the kinds of things that you described sound to me like those are things that should have been designed better. And at least you've heard and can properly report if it's advantageous for you to do so, if the trustees are concerned why this just didn't work the way, why wasn't it designed to work the way it should work?
This happens sometimes with proprietary materials and systems that, you know, when we bid out, and I'm not trying to make excuses, I'm just giving
Yeah.
perspective.
I-
We
can-
designed a project in 2016, 2018. Think of Candace's world, IT. Every 3 years, things are making giant leaps and bounds. You design something, and now the manufacturer that you're going to is, oh, well, we scrapped that and we came up with this new design.
sure,
So some things are not.
Well, and if that's the honest case of what happened, then there's might be a little more understanding.
yeah,
I will dig into it a little bit more, and I can report out next meeting where the root of the cause, whether it was a manufacturer proprietary change or we just missed it.
Yeah, okay.
Who's the architect other than, who's the person locally that you said is with Canon that's focusing on the project you mentioned?
Yeah, and I'm not, I can get you the name. I'm not, because I'm not going to pronounce it correctly. So,
Is it
yeah.
Crayful?
No, it's Hazem. He's here in Pasadena. Yeah.
Okay, so,
So,
want to pass on more good news?
Yes, yeah.
And
So, I mean,
we'll get back to the aquatic center, we're gonna
Yeah.
Oreo cookie, the good and the bad. you know?
yeah, I think so. I'll give you the.
Obviously, you're the white cream kind of guy in the middle, right?
Yeah, we'll try to do that. But, so, just to finish, Serafian, it's moving forward. We've got some delays. We've got some change orders. It's, in my career, it's not a bad project.
Yeah.
I've seen slightly better and I've seen a lot worse. So we're moving forward, and PCL, I met with PCL. Like I said, they're committed. They want to be here. We'll partner with them. I'll get in the middle of it with the team, design team, and PCL. And I met with the vice presidents. So they want to be here and they want to deliver us a nice building. So we're going to try to help them out and work that out.
Great.
So we got a lot of work going on. There's a lot of things happening besides preparing for the list that's on the facilities master plan of those projects. Right now, currently in progress, we have the GM building. We're doing a locker replacement for the football lockers. We initiated that contract on June, and we have a 16-week delivery time, so we're just any day now. We're looking at those lockers coming in. We'll coordinate with staff and get the new lockers in
Is
for
GM like short for gym? Is it really?
yeah.
Wow.
So, yeah.
It's kind of
Well,
random.
Well, we you'll find that there are buildings with very long names, and they kind of shorten everything to alphabetical. So, I mean, I don't know, you know, this is the C building, yet it will soon be the Jack Scott building. So, I mean, there's,
PEC as an identifier?
there was,
They're
there
gonna
was.
really try to transition, I think the goal is to transition our calling of buildings by the building name itself. So that's why we often talk about Serafian building. Back in the day, that used to be called the U building or UU.
That's right.
UU or U, and so we've transitioned our language around Serafian. My guess will be the same around Jack Scott.
Yeah, so what happened is in the facilities master plan, we talked about wayfinding, and
Mhm.
we said, why aren't we calling the buildings
By their names.
by their names? So we, like Ken said, we took the initiative here and we've been saying Serafian.
Sure. No, yeah.
So that's where we're trying to change the tide on that. Community
I think you
education.
should use numbers now. Or actually, let's wait 10 years and then start using numbers.
Start a new system.
Right?
Yeah.
And then double digits like before, and then go back to
The names.
letters.
Yeah. The Community Education Center, we just did a lighting dimmer board project in the MPR. The old system, that building was built in, I think it was commissioned in '98. The old dimmer board for the MPR, kaput, it was worn
Yes.
out. So we finally got that up and going, and we just completed that, and we're in the closeout process right now. So they have all new lighting controls for the dimming, and we fixed a couple other things. There was there's some high windows with some automatic shades so that you can get ambient light or reduce it. So we fixed a couple other things while we're there in the multi-purpose room. C building. We finally signed a contract for the C building controls upgrade. This will bring both sides, east and west, into automatic control, or remote control. Currently, only half the building is on the plant and the electronic controls. The other half of the building we've been working it through with manual adjustments. So this was a really big project because it's too cold on one side and the other side's fine. So we're finally going to have that going.
How would that implementation of those controls, would that impact, like, how intensive of the work would?
So basically, it's at certain points in the building.
Okay. Oh, so it's not-
There's variable drives, and coils, and we basically regulate the water flow through that to regulate the cold.
But there won't be like, we're not gonna be like shutting, like we have to do for here, we're not like closing off any parts of the building.
No, there will be certain areas, and then plus we also worked, the work schedule is nights, weekends, etc.
Great.
But it will be localized, and it will be where the controller is, and in this project, due to some other environmental concerns, this project we scoped as having, on the side of it, wireless controls, because otherwise there'd be a huge impact, and we would have to do some environmental mitigation that would just, at this point,
Too much.
it's, yes. This building is scheduled for a modernization, and at that time, we would go ahead and take care of those environmental concerns. Right now, it didn't make sense, and I need to get control so that everybody is comfortable, so.
And it's also gonna save significant money, right?
Instead of
At
fixing it
this
all
time,
now.
well,
Yeah.
it's kicking, I hate to use this term, but it's kicking the can down the road. It is something that we will do. It just won't be associated with this project.
Mhm.
It will be associated in the modernization of the Jack Scott building.
Just out of curiosity, which side is the colder?
That's based on your glasses.
Audrey, which side's the colder building? Side of the building? I
this
see you with a
building?
jacket on, so I believe it's the
I've
east.
been freezing right over there in this
Oh.
area, but recently it's been very warm.
Oh, okay. I want to say it's the east side of the building, that the west side it has controls.
Huh.
Because HR and fiscal don't call me all the time, and I get calls from the academic side, which are more classrooms are on the east side, so.
Interesting.
You might have walked past it, or you can look out the window and see stuff. We are mobilized, and we are on a 2-week schedule for the removal and replacement of the exterior signage for the Jack Scott building.
So,
So
is it
we're
just
on-
going to say Pasadena City College Jack Scott Building, or what is it going to say?
I'm sorry, I could have brought the
No, no,
rendition,
it's okay.
but it says Jack Scott building, Pasadena City College.
Okay. So right now it says prominently, it says Pasadena City College. That entire thing's been removed and just going to say Jack Scott Building, Pasadena City College.
Yeah, they've switched locations.
Okay. Is there a space then in the front of campus where the name of the school is prominent?
It was
Not
here.
Yeah, right. That was it, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting because that kind of is, I think for most people, the front of the C building with the mirror pool is kind of the entry of Pasadena. It's the formal entry of Pasadena City College. So it's interesting to not have the name
Yeah.
prominently.
We're far down the pipeline.
Oh,
Too far down the
are.
pipe.
But I was just curious and not suggesting anything whatsoever. Just,
No, but it's a good point.
Yeah, I tend to try to stay out of those design type issues. I just try to get it built for you guys. So
yeah.
there was a number of
No, this
reviews by
decision
Jack and the
long ago.
foundation
Yeah.
and the college representatives that we came up with. I think it was based off of the presentation to the board, so I don't think it's too far off of.
And that came to the board, what, 2 years ago? A year? This is a
been a
while
while.
ago, right? So,
I can't remember it. Okay.
okay.
Miracles.
Yes, so that's the Jack Scott building. Flipping over the page real quick, we're, oops, where did I go? Roofing, did I get there? No, I skipped one, okay. We are at the very bottom, okay, so Octagon Gym. We did mobilize for that project. That was a project that was started in, as a initiative during COVID for outdoor activity. And so that one is finally mobilized. We'll be working that out. It's a really nice project. It's the outdoor gym, some shade structures, and it's kind of utilizing an area that's underutilized on our field. January should be our delivery for that, so we'll be up and running for spring. Campus.
Which might be one of our first CBOC sort of site
Okay.
reviews, that we would invite our CBOC members to come out and inspect our site, because we'll use bond funding for the Octagon Gym.
CBOC,
The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee.
Okay.
I apologize.
that's CBOC, got it.
Yes. So that might be the first time we invite them to come to campus to review one of the projects.
Our other critical path project is the mirror pools for the celebration. So we are diligently working with the designer now that we've straightened out a few things, and we're anticipating that going into DSA in November.
Do we have an expected completion date timeline for that? I know in earlier conversations we were trying to rush to get things approved in order to get
Yeah,
things through.
so I basically, when we were working with the architect, gave them a drop dead of February of '24, and that was based on, and that gave me some float in
Mhm.
case. That was based on a directive, information. I
Yeah.
don't want to say directive, but information that the celebration, the 100-year celebration would be May of '25. So I misspoke. It should be February of '25.
February of 25.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the celebrations are
Celebration
through
was-
2024.
And 25, yeah, it's that entire academic year.
Roofing phase 2. We did roof part of the college, and there will be actually a phase 3 roofing. Right now, we
Sorry
just
to pause you there.
Sure.
I was just thinking of the mirror pools in relation to the fact that the C building, the way the signage is going to be. Will there be a way to maybe incorporate the words Pasadena State College in the front of the mirror pools or something like that? I'm not sure if this is also too far. I'm just thinking in relation to these two things now, because when you look at the front of campus, you know, because obviously our big sign is on the corners here,
Mhm, mhm.
right? And so people, when you're driving, obviously you know what this is, but when you're coming up,
all
You're talking about a monument sign.
not necessarily just something where it says.
Right, but it would have to be a monument sign if it's not on.
Because we didn't approve, I remember we approved the traditional design, right? Not
I
the,
wasn't going to be able to try to pronounce his last name, but
The
that's
traditional design
Right.
versus the
That's our
modern.
design.
right, waterfall
Infinity
thing, which
ends.
means that there is an edge
Mhm.
at the front. I don't feel strongly about this, I'm literally thinking of being able to identify, because we use the picture of that as in everything, and being able to identify the campus from the shot of the front of the campus is just something I'm thinking about here.
I'm really usually not that quick with this stuff, but let me see if I can.
No, this doesn't have to be right now, you can totally Richard, I don't want to derail the conversation, I just thought.
We can come back to it.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
seeing.
we
I was
can
trying
come
to.
to it.
I was trying to get a picture of. I thought maybe if I showed you what it looked like, but I can send that back out.
Okay.
It might be. Pasadena City College might be large enough that you.
It
Let
would
me
be.
give you the
Okay.
rendition.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just not sure.
It's,
Again.
it's very unorthodox
Yeah.
to have the name of the building
Bigger than the college.
bigger than the college. But
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I'm learning the prior
But,
board, not
you know,
not
it
anyone
is what it is,
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
but it's not, you know, there are other ways of sort of
Yeah.
addressing this. I mean, you do have two other buildings that are right on Colorado that could serve as, you know, take whatever you would see here, it wouldn't be as
No, it's just a thought.
appealing, gorgeous, spectacular,
Yeah.
but it would at least let people know that they're
Yeah.
in front of Pasadena City College.
This is
Yes.
obviously not
Yeah.
at all anything. I'm not trying to say that Senator Scott's name should be any smaller or anything like that. It's nothing related to. I'm really glad the name is going to be prominently displayed. That's going to say the Jack Scott Building. And anybody's listening, I want to make that clear. I'm not trying to say that. But
It's just
obviously-
more of saying, hey, how do we also be mindful
Yes.
of creating that presence? And we can add that to the list and have continued conversations about it. but also giving you the rendering. I think
That might
you've
help.
seen it, it might help to sort of
Perfect.
freeze a little bit.
Perfect.
So
Yeah,
that's
no,
what
I can-
hopefully
I can pose the question to the mirror pool designer, and we can maybe take that frontage view
Yeah.
and maybe transpose it in and see if there's something we can
Something.
do,
Yeah.
maybe.
Great.
I don't know, we
Sure.
can try to,
No,
we can try to
totally,
do something.
You can make it so the reflection, is
Yeah.
actually, the reflection,
Bounces
it's
back.
actually the vintage look.
Thank you.
Sure. You're welcome. When we're moving along, roofing phase 2, we just received authorization to
Mhm.
bid that. We're in pre-qual for that. Colorado campus exterior paint, we're in the middle of doing pre-qual for that also, with the idea that we were gonna get that out and done before the 100-year celebration. Keyless access control, we're in design progress prioritization for GM, LL, and C buildings. Power distribution center, we have initialized the contractor pre-qualification process for the lease-leaseback delivery method is still forthcoming.
This is the one that's gonna be next to Seraphia.
It's right in the middle of that footprint, so. Tenant improvements, we finally have, we're anticipating, we're still just coming out of DSA with tenant improvements, and we're hoping for a construction start in November.
Are these
That's-
classrooms or?
No, we have 2 offline spaces, and the one will, C-150, I believe, is distance education.
Ah.
C-137 is going to be Crystal's group.
Mhm. And then professional development will stay up with the institution.
And 221 gets, yeah,
Equity.
and equity comes in there, yeah.
Oh, great.
Mhm.
So it's mainly administrative
Makes sense.
offices. Center for the Arts, we're reworking the exit doors on the egress stairwells. And Child Development Center, we're gonna be upgrading the fire alarm process.
Great.
Fire alarm. And then we're looking at parking lot for rehabilitation. We received the authorization to bid that project, and that is basically a minor cosmetic rehabilitation of some spalled concrete on the east side, a relamping project with up-to-date LED, and also a repainting of that structure.
Great.
Other highlights are we're looking at the formal update to the campus master plan. That's going to be forthcoming. We did the previous facilities subcommittee. We did go through a facilities master plan update, which talked about, and we're going to get into that with the aquatic center. The aquatic center, it talked about lot 3 extension, and it also talked about a couple other parking issues. So there's some minor things that we would like to formalize because we only presented it to the facilities committee, but we did not bring it forward for a full vetting by the board and community. So
For
we're
the
gonna,
changes.
yeah, the changes. So we're gonna be looking to formalize those in the next couple months and come to the board and community in January for comment. And then we would update the facilities master plan. It's just minor, it's some minor changes that make sense. We are working forward to getting ready for the bond. We've shortlisted the PMCM firms for staff augmentation. We just finished up also with the DSA project inspection firms for state building code compliance. So those are 2 necessary components to doing the work. And right now, we're just finishing up the RFP for the shortlisting the bench of architects. And once I can get them on board, we'll go into full design on Galloway Plaza Cafe, the W building demolition and bungalows for swing space, Sexton Auditorium refresh, boiler house retrofit, the new student services building programming, and working on design build criteria documents for campus-wide. Now the rest of your Oreo sandwich,
Okay, now to the pool, you're saying?
Yes.
unless there's any questions.
For lot 4, how long do you expect Will there be like a lot of construction in that time?
There's not physically a lot of construction, but what we'll end up doing with lot 4 is that any parking that I look at that we do is we would start during summer. Because that's the least amount of impact to the campus. So it would be a kickoff during summer, and then we would phase lot 4 in such a way that you would either be entering, we would do maybe the first floor and the second floor would be offline. So then when we're doing the third and fourth floor, certain exits and entrances would be open. So it would be able to be partially used. And we would just phase it so that it wouldn't be the whole building offline for 6 months. It would be, we would try to get as much as we could get done during summer. And then we would then open for fall and give, if we're still working on it, giving varied access. Okay, sure. Candace?
Dun, 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 aquatic centers. So we just wanted to give some background in terms of where we've been, what sort of considerations that we need as we're planning the project and having the conversations on campus about how to sort of proceed. Richard had shared that in our original facilities master plan, it had been articulated that the pool would actually move to the Del Mar Bonnie side of the, our neighbors were not very pleased with that, and through lots of rigorous conversation with them as well as with other community members, sort of thinking about keeping it in its same location, I think is the direction that we want to recommend. But just sort of giving background. Do you want to give this part and then I can give the considerations, Richard?
Certainly. So, talk about an intersection of bad things happening.
March 2020.
Yeah, it's pretty much. We were being alerted to some issues on the pool late in 19. Pasadena Health was asking us about there's a certain life to the main drain grates and where we were at with that. We were about a year out from replacement of the main drain grates. We had some plaster issues and there was some decking spalling, and so the surface, it needed some attention. Then COVID hit. And so we basically took the pool offline. While the pool was offline, some additional items came up, and we have a couple pictures coming up. There was a severe failure of the cantilever deck. And that's the middle picture. So the far picture is the worn plaster. So instead of having the nice white smooth plaster, it's already had popped off and has gone down to the gunite, which is the shotcrete base of the shell. So the health department, we can't even swim in it until that was taken care of. They want the plaster. The secondary thing that happened from fall of 2020 through 21, we started seeing some cracking along the edge of the cantilever deck. And so basically the pool deck is cantilevered because you have the spillway so that we don't get waves when they're having competition. So it's cantilevered over a return drain system. So it kind of looks like that. So that's what you're looking at, this cantilever deck. Due to design issues, I would say, and due to a lot of things, moisture had gotten in, the concrete had cracked, moisture got in, and when moisture starts getting into the steel actually expands and then puts more pressure on the concrete and breaks the concrete. So that's what you're seeing is, you can see that long bar there, that's a piece of reinforcing steel in the edge of the deck. So that started and is continuing to go, it was only in the shallow end, it's now going around the whole pool. And then the Pasadena Health had also brought up the far, my right.
Yeah.
The far right picture is just, there's some various areas on the deck that are spalling that need to be repaired and have been repaired. So in conjunction with what's happening on the cantilever deck, we're talking about to rehabilitate this pool, which Candace will go into some of the considerations. Not only do we need to drain it, replaster it, fix the control joint between the two, the shallow end and the deep end, we also need to demolish all of the decking that's on top of it and redo that if it's to stay where it's going to stay. The reason we did put it on pause is the facilities master plan as approved, as Candace pointed out, had the pool moving to the corner of Bonnie and Del Mar. So that's kind of where we are today. We're just kind of in a holding pattern till we make a decision which way we want to go, and then Candace is going to go into some of those considerations
Sure.
on project development.
So, we've just, our facilities, college council subcommittee is gonna start to, participate and become the college's bond oversight group. Just giving, because we have representatives from faculty, classified management, and associated students are all on that committee. That doesn't mean they're the only folks that will participate, but they help to sort of give the overall guidance in terms of like, yeah, that makes sense. Let me go talk back with my constituent groups and bring feedback to the oversight group. And so our first meeting for that group is September 28th. And there, we're gonna really start helping them understand what their role is as the oversight committee, as well as how we'll run these individual projects. For example, Serafian will have its own user group
Yep.
under this bond oversight group, right? We want the people who have to live in that building and be in that building on a daily basis to really have a lot of significant input. And so we're working to build that user group, and the secondary group that we're going to be building under the oversight group is the mirror pools. So again, another constituent group, you know, where we have all representatives who are going to help us with sort of landscaping considerations. There's a little bit of flexibility on design, but we've already sort of like we're sticking with traditional, but we still need some guidance related to some decisions that need to be made. So those are be the two first user groups that'll be formed under the oversight committee. A part of the oversight committee's responsibility will be helping give feedback about sequencing. How do we sequence all of this? Is like a chess game, right? We're gonna be sort of like figuring out, you know, how does this fit, you know? Are we staying on the east side of campus so we can finish, you know, Serafian, right? There's a lot of impact. Potentially, our recommendation is, well, let's do the seismic retrofit of the E building while we're on that side of campus, as well as we're starting sort of the design work for the student services building. So we've got some ideas in terms of what we think makes sense, but we need to be able to vet that with this oversight committee who can gain some feedback from the larger constituent groups, just like, oh, that makes sense, that doesn't make sense, did you know that this was happening, you know, that kind of piece. So that kicks off at the end of this month and really sort of hits the ground running in October. As you know, so as thinking about the reason why we haven't, people say, well, what have we done with the pool? Well, the pool was supposed to move. Per the approved plan, the pool is not supposed to be in its current location. And so at that time, you know, it was like, well, why would we invest into, you know, the existing pool when we know we're going to be demolishing and maybe building over that footprint and then moving the pool to Bonnie. As we got into 2020, 2021, it's sort of, you know, our neighbors, other constituents, like, does it really make sense to move the pool to Bonnie and Del Mar? There's going to be extra traffic there. That's where our neighbors were really kicking up a storm. Are we going to support the bond? You know, because that's really, you know, they already have an issue with the stadium. You know, they're a very active group, and that's not to say that they just completely guide our process, but we do want to be strategic and thoughtful partners because we're also in their community. They're, you know, they live where they live, but we also need to be mindful. And so, lots of conversation, and the question, you know, that a lot of folks raised, even within PCC, was, well, why would we move the pool? What is the advantage of moving the pool? And so it's a great conversation. So that's where we get into that sort of revision of the FMP. You know, again, re-engaging the constituents here, do some revisions, largely about, you know, keeping the pool where that may be a consideration of keeping the pool in its existing footprint. But what's also sort of looming in that particular area is the W building is scheduled for demolition next summer, fall, right? So that that building is, now, 2 years ago, we had an engineer come out that said, hey, you need to get out of the W building within 2 years, so we are complying with that. Scheduling has taken the W building offline, so they're no longer scheduling classes as of winter of 2024. That building is then going to be demolished. Then we just need to thought process, well, if we're going to have major sort of construction equipment in that area, does it make sense to rebuild the pool at that time? You know, would we be able to have community members? I mean, there's just all these sort of sequencing pieces that are going to happen in that area. The lockers are in the W building, so if we demolish the W building, there are no longer places for people to change, and so we need then a strategy on bringing bungalows in to kind of help with that, which is totally possible, like, right, we need restroom facilities, bungalows to help serve that need. So there's all these sort of mini conversations that need to happen to help us sequence the pool's remediation. And so I was gonna say, just, you could hit just the next one.
Yes.
And then we'll get to the last one, and then we'll open up for questions.
Thank you.
So originally, some of the piece that may be driving us to really consider keeping the pool in its existing, the original relocation costs were estimated about $15 million. And if we were to maintain the existing FMP vision, of course, the funds would be allocated through Measure PCC. So it's not a funding issue per se, do we have access to funds, but is that where we want to spend this first Series A portion? And versus the repair cost of in the current location is estimated about $3 to $4 million. So it is a significant, it's not a small project, it's a significant investment, again, through Measure PCC. Selecting a timeline though to remediate and reopen the pool based on the construction work that's planned in that area is what we're really trying to work through. Again, based on these sequencing pieces. So it's not, are we gonna have a pool? Of course we're gonna have a pool. It's not, you know, I think we're very committed to that. I think we're trying to, from a construction standpoint, from a risk standpoint, when does it really make sense to make these repairs? So as we're bringing in this heavy equipment to demolish, I mean, if you remember how it was when we started to demolish Serafian, that's major equipment going into that area and some planning pieces that just need to be put in place. So those are part of the sequencing pieces that Richard and team are really working through to kind of come up with some recommendations that we can then give out to the college community, as well as then bring forward to the Board of Trustees for your input and approval.
The only thing I'd like to add is
Please.
Leaving the pool where it is, and this is something that we've vet out, significantly impacts the footprint of the new academic building.
I was just gonna ask that.
So really this is why we wanted to go ahead and look back at updating the FMP, looking at where programs are. Currently in the FMP, I think we have a rehabilitation of the R building. And so in the new FMP, we may look at it, it may not make sense to rehabilitate the R building, knowing if the pool stays there and we have a smaller footprint, maybe we get a smaller building and maybe we demolish the R building and rebuild an academic building there. But there's a lot of, like Candace said, this is a big moving chessboard of, okay, if I do that, what comes at me from this way? And we're just trying to figure out what serves the college the best. What pathway should we go with these buildings? And again, it goes back to reevaluating, hey, this FMP started in like 16, 17, and it was revitalized and published for 2020. And now here we are 3 years later, we've had a pandemic, we have hybrid classes. So that's where we're re-engaging them to kind of come in and take a look at this and give us considerations.
Re-engaging who?
HGA,
The architects.
the same architect, yeah.
So, I mean, you answered my first question, thank you, Richard, about like, you know, that there was meant to be an academic building on where the pool is. And of course, the pool is smack dab in the middle of campus. Well, not literally, but it's the middle of campus. And what I appreciate about the former FMP having that academic building there is it really making more use of the land at the heart of the campus. But I appreciate that there needs to be a relook into the FMP itself and all of that. And I think that that's a process that definitely, I'm happy is going to begin and is going to continue. I guess if we were tearing down the W building and at the same time, since there's stuff already going to be there, the heavy construction equipment's already going to be there, so we redo the pool, will we then also construct something at the same time there? Or a building there, or would it just be the pool that we're doing, or leaving that space blank?
No, no, we're not leaving,
have
so the
plans.
the footprint of the W building becomes critical for kickoff the student services building.
Okay.
So what our plan is when the W building is demolished, we would end up bringing in portable housing. And that would get the W building footprint would get paved, it would get programmed it would just become a little bungalow city. And that that programming, that's again, HGA is gonna come in and take a look at that to make sure that we can get everybody that's in L building into bungalows comfortably. You've got, when that building is demolished, besides paving it, it's higher currently. When we rebuild something, obviously we would have a basement level in it if we put a building there that would then have on the deck level, and it would have deck roll-up storage for the netting and the water polo equipment, and then it would have a deck level entrance into the building, which would probably have a gym and a locker rooms. That would be the future vision of whatever's on that footprint, the W footprint, after we use it for swing space. That would be the long-term vision. If we were to go move forward with the pool project, we would take it to a line knowing that we're fixing the decking from this line over, and that will always stay. And then from this line here will be impacted by that building footprint. We could bring in, depending on the space, and we haven't engaged the architect yet for that, but we could bring in restroom portables so that they could be restrooms on part of the portable and locker rooms on the other side of the portables. We haven't, again, these are all considerations and which angle are we going to go and what are we going to do.
And for that space, that would be the portable swing space. Would that be used just for, assuming we do the student services building as the next kind of big new building, would that be just to house that, or would that continue to be used as swing space until other projects are done?
Well, in my view,
yeah, of course, none of that is decided yet.
yeah, in my view, the logical way and the logistics here would be is we would build a new student service center. The people that are in the bungalows would then move into the new student service center. We would then, there are other programs throughout the district that would come to the new student service center, which would leave me some additional swing space. I would like to be looking at the rehabilitation of the R building at that time and utilizing the swing space then to rehabilitate the R building.
Sure.
I mean, so we would use it for multiple projects as swing space.
Sure.
But again, that's all part of this moving chessboard. So I got John putting his.
Yeah, you guys sound like in trouble. Go ahead.
Are there any other, I maybe shouldn't ask this, but are there any other potential locations for the pool, such as parking lot, corner of Colorado and
Lot 1?
yeah, is that what lot 1 is, or somewhere along hill?
Yeah, we could look at, the problem is the college is landlocked, and we could look at space, and you're gonna lose, so if we put it there, then you've put a significant impact on parking. So I also saw an iteration where there was a giant sports complex in some iteration, I think it might have been in the 2016 FMP, where they, on the east side of Serafian, so that would be impacting lot 6, which is going to be a new science building also, or a STEM building, and then lot 7, which is where faculty is parking. There was very grandiose plans putting a sports complex over there, but then again, you're right off residential. So the most attractive places to put something, if you were going to consider the pool in another location, would be possibly lot 3, because you have commercial space directly across, back in, right off
Which
of the
one is
hill.
lot 3?
Del Mar and Hill.
Oh, don't worry.
Where the fair.
We would move it, you would move it up more towards the Hill Street entrance, because we were gonna soften the Del Mar perimeter to help.
Not be so concrete.
Yeah, to help with it a little bit, the view from that side. Or, the other thing is you're not gonna be competing, or you're not gonna be disturbing the community if you get it more towards Colorado. It's outside of my office, and believe me, that thing goes till 9:30, 10 o'clock. Because there is community use after hours, after the
Sure.
swim teams and stuff. And I think that actually it starts early in the morning before classes, and then it goes after classes. So it's lit up and it is noisy. And so part of that consideration is when we looked at that and looked at it going down in Del Mar, right in the heart of residential, it was just not penciling out.
So that's probably why it's in the middle of the campus.
Yeah, it
There's
kind of gets
probably some really
insulated.
smart people many years
Yeah.
ago
It
that
kinda-
thought about that.
The only other place in campus, but I don't even think you have the footprint for it, at some point, we were looking between C and CA, the V building would be demolished, and we were looking at putting a collaborative space there, like an outdoor
Yeah.
study space, something to tie, just to soften
C
it.
is this building.
Yeah.
Yeah,
V is.
Right.
Where
Next
the pathway
door.
center is.
Oh.
yeah. And
The
then,
two stories.
so between CA and C, and that's a pretty tight place. So I think you'd probably get a lot of sound resonance because they're both tall buildings, and they're just going to echo in there.
See, my concern is not necessarily, I don't mind having a pool in the middle of campus. I'm just thinking about those downstream effects, because that academic building was going to be pretty substantial,
Yes.
right? And it would, hopefully to be far from now, but alleviate a lot of space concerns. And so, I was just trying to figure out, if we keep it here, and of course, it feels like, in this entire consideration, as you had mentioned, like touching parking is going to be a touchy subject. So,
Look at
yeah, I just don't know how. I feel like we don't really have. There's no really another option.
So let me tell you what I'm troubled with. I'm troubled with, and I have a copy of the master plan here. I even brought, and I don't say much. I even brought the big one.
Can I borrow that?
You wanna borrow that? You gonna memorize that?
For you if you want. Okay.
Anyway, so as you're saying all these things, I'm flipping back and forth between
Pages,
the
yeah.
existing and the new, and there, of course, there's a flip of each other, makes it hard.
These are
Anyway.
all one, right?
Yeah.
A massive file.
But here's what I'm having problems with. I'm having problems with, this was a rather long substantive process to go through this master plan. We had community meetings in all the districts. It started with an educational master plan, and it went through this very time-intensive total campus crescendo to the Board of Trustees, kumbaya moment where we approved it. And so I'm having a little trouble with, you always have to make adjustments, but when you start moving some of the big pieces around, I start to have a little problem with that, because this was kind of the deal. Well, I didn't get to my thought, but go ahead.
Go ahead, you finish your thought.
Well, that basically is my thought. That's what I'm wrestling with, is obviously you can ask the board to engage the same folks to come up with some alternatives. What does that cost us besides a little money? It costs us a little more time. We have a kind of a big decision to make, like because the pool was supposed to be phase 2 on this, right behind Seraphian, which means it's supposed to have been like getting queued up right now. And you don't want to spend $4 million and then move it. And so I'm just, you know, I mean, you're going to have this meeting on September 28th. They're going to get to know each other's names and the concepts. This is the beginning. This isn't going to redesign the master plan.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So how do we resolve this? Because in the meantime, we got this inoperative pool, right? And it's my understanding that the pool, the inoperativeness of the pool goes right down to the rebar that was the wrong rebar. Placed under in the actual supporting concrete, which I'm not sure if the 3 to 4 million is tearing all that up to get the right stuff in there, or just doing the.
I wanted, yeah, trustee Chen, because I do have comments.
Yeah, okay.
I remember sitting here with not the previous president, but the previous president, President Verdian, and we were talking about the education master plan because we wanted to have the education master plan to accompany the facilities master plan. And the facilities master plan is really built around the enrollment projections and around the education, right? The education blueprint of PCC. And to John's point, which I agree with, is that we did go through this entire, I don't want to call it an exercise because it was more than an exercise, you know, and it was a way to bring the community together, to really look at the vision for PCC in the next 50 years, in the next, you know, the next generation of PCC. And there was student input, and there was, you know, community input, stakeholder input. And so for us to be revisiting this again feels like we've taken 3 steps forward and 2 steps, you know, backward. And at what point do we decide to say we're going to need to move forward? Because whichever way you analyze it, it's going to make sense, right? And so I want to make sure that we're not in this state of analysis paralysis. And we have this opportunity with the bond, the stakeholders, constituents, voters believe in what we're going to do. And I feel that we need to move forward, certainly with thought. At the same time, we need to make some decisions.
And then you got the whole bond, I mean, I guess the current bond triage or whatever you call it is kind of allocated just to wrapping and some other things. But you have that whole piece of it, it's all tied to this too, right?
Sure. I would say 2 things. I hear you because it was a journey, and many, I'd say for myself, starting in 2018, you're sort of in that mid-journey where they had been discussing this for many, many years, and then finally got to a point in 2020 to then sign off on, okay, you've got this really big, beautiful document that a variety of folks have contributed to. So I hear you on that, and I think whatever we decide to do, I think does need to be entered into and thoughtfully and intentionally and backed by data. One thing I would just lay for your consideration is 2020 happened. The pandemic has fundamentally changed education, the way that we're going to deliver education in the future that has never been conceived or discussed as it relates to our facilities master planning process. And it may give us a moment to just take a step back to also validate program growth in certain areas. What we thought was going to happen in certain programs may not be happening. What we thought was not going to happen in others may be happening, where we're getting these expansion in other program areas that were not, again, conceived, because just sort of the shifting piece around students and what they need is now different in higher education as a whole. And so it does give us a moment to just go back and verify, based on enrollment numbers, projections, where programs are expanding, where they're contracting, to just tighten up to say, does this continue to make sense? Do we need to make adjustments based on community? Not do a whole new FMP, but there are pieces which do we need? I mean, there are questions that are being raised. Do we need a really large, brand new academic building? Are we going to have enrollment to support that? We all say yes. We're all hopeful for that, right?
But hope is not a strategy, right? Yeah,
So we do need some piece of data to help inform, and we've got really good data to kind of help just re-engage. This isn't a 2-year process. This is now we're hoping to come up with some recommendations by early next year, but it also doesn't stop us from the pieces that we know are going to happen. We know that we need a revitalized student services building. That's not been in debate, so we can start a good portion of that work today without any impact. We know that we are expanding in our STEM areas in a way that the college is just not, from a facilities perspective, we are not able to keep up with the demands in health sciences in those areas, and which is why we've articulated the new, we call it the building east of Serafian. But and those pieces can continue to move and transform while we just verify these pieces. If at the end the trustees say, look, it makes continued sense to continue on this path, that's where we're going. That's Richard and I certainly are. We want to execute what the campus needs based on the direction of the board as well as feedback from the community. But it's just, for me, I see it as just a validation of our world is different. What we knew in 2016 is now different today. And how do we then just check to make sure that some of these assumptions that we had going into the planning process are still valid?
I do think it's fair, to take an assessment. I certainly, our enrollment numbers have changed drastically in the last, 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I do recall Trustee Martin made a comment during this process that, especially during the pandemic, are students going to be coming back on campus, or are we going to invest in satellite campuses? So, if the enrollment numbers are not going to increase like the way they did pre-COVID, then the satellite campuses, that's an alternative. That was not part of the
That's true.
So I think what I would want to see first and foremost would be a timeline of master plan refresh, shall we say.
Deal.
And on that timeline, so we're bringing HGA back to look over some of these pieces, and when are they going to be able to deliver some ideas back to the campus and the board. And because in some ways we're freezing our decision on the pool because we don't know that time parameter. It's a function of money and time, and we don't know the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So to me, the biggest thought process is immediately we need to see how fast can they be engaged, how fast can they get some of these alternate ideas back to us. It does make sense that maybe a smaller building, there's lots of things that make sense.
Yeah.
There's too many for us to, though it's fun to talk about here. there's too many for us to do that. So I can certainly see re-engaging them to help us, and a big part of that is this pool, obviously.
If I may, and not to belabor, and you hit the points I wanted to get to, is number one is we're not redoing the entire master plan. We're still moving, we don't have paralysis. We are moving forward with the student services building, and we're also moving forward with the building to the east of Serafian. Again, as we said, the facilities master plan is a living document. It isn't static, so to speak. We had the pandemic, and generally every 5 to 10 years, in the industry is usually the life cycle of these master plans.
It's 5 to 10 years to
Make one.
develop it.
We might be a difficult client. I can't speak to why it took so long here to do, but what I'm hearing today, and again, as we go through shared governance, if the pool is a major priority and it needs to be done now, we'll figure out a plan to make it happen. I can tell you, if it was to stay at the Del Mar, all of Serafian Science Village does not vacate with Serafian coming online. There was about a third of the staff and programs that would be still in Science Village, which would mean that if I'm going to take labs now, I would have to come up with different labs. So you would be looking at a minimum 2029 before Science Village is on the table to be rehabilitated. So again, if you're telling me the pool needs to, if it's a critical priority that we have a functional pool, then we are getting driven to leaving it in place and repairing it and coming up with some alternate temporary locker systems, etc. As we proceed with construction of the student services and science building.
So I'm hearing a chicken and an egg in a way. And so that's why this is a not concept down but detailed up, in my opinion, decision. Because, and which is why the faster we get this engaged and understand the timeline helps us with the answer, right? Because if in a relatively short period of time we could come to, we know that an answer is available as to whether the pool should move or not, then we would wait to get that good intel before we plot $4 million into it, right? If we won't be able to get that answer till 2029, then I'm saying, okay, we may need to do something. So this is what I mean by a chicken and egg. So that's why I'm saying the most critical piece to me is if all these things are now moving and off the table and floating around for all the good reasons, we have to quickly engage and come up with a timeline that shows us when the alternatives can be decided so that we can see what to do in the interim or not.
Jose was going to say something.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the pool being at Bonnie and Del Mar is even a possibility. So that's not even something that we're going to consider. It's just not possible, right?
It would take us a very long, to Richard's point about.
But even if that, let's just take that off.
Our neighbors would have a very, difficult time with the city.
Okay. So if that's not the case, right, you basically have an option of, do we have to?
Well, I'm not going to write that off just because there was a small amount of neighbors that could have some legitimate concern. I'm not saying they're not legitimate, but we're talking about, you can count them here, people. You can count them here, right?
I don't even think it's that many.
I don't think it's that many.
It's
But-
probably like 12.
Okay, so
And the city council.
so I'm not
Yes.
gonna. Well, and that's all viable. I'm not gonna just write it off for that. On the other hand, I'm gonna be sensitive to that. And I think we gotta, the next best thing is if there's too much up in the air, we gotta get something down on the table again. You gotta get these people engaged and get a timeline that we can assess, right?
So, the other part that I was gonna make here is that I get a very uncomfortable feeling that even with the voter support of this bond measure, that we're gonna have some significant brand diminishers all over the campus, like a pool that is just not being utilized, these modular bungalows all over the place. I hear more about, the STEM bungalows than anything else. I know it's not, it's just the reality that we have. I understand that. And so, as we proceed, like John is saying, with an expedited analysis and evaluation of how we're going to move forward, I think it's also important for us, to examine, for modulars, for example. There are modulars and then there are modulars, right? There are the modulars that I used when I was in elementary school that are those modulars over there. And then there are some slightly more expensive modulars that are, I feel more appropriate for, institution of higher education, right? And then this HGA, again, I don't know what I don't know, but do they know what they don't know? It seems like, John, you're questioning them or what transpired here.
No, I'm not questioning them or what transpired. I'm questioning the fact that after a long, arduous process, this entire institution solidified this plan. I understand there's good reason to do a refresh on it.
Right.
But you can't just go into a meeting and say, okay, now the pool's not going to be here. You gotta do something a little more.
I think that's our
Well,
goal with
Yeah.
HGA is to come back out and to verify some pieces, right? So the positive is that the bulk of the plan is being executed on, right? We are making movement, to Chanel's point, we are making substantive improvement, not only on the scheduled maintenance side that we see with our lots and conversations around solar and these pieces. Those pieces are actually in progress. There are some pieces that we're just needing to just double check and verify. If we verify that it makes more sense to move it to Del Mar and Bonnie based on, I think we're willing to do
I'm not
that and to have
pushing
the
that. I'm just
the
saying.
timeline.
Yeah, I think we're all saying the same
I think
thing.
so.
I think
I
what
do.
you're looking for, honestly, before you go before the board, is the right word. So this isn't a modification to the master plan, because that's too big of a word.
Yeah.
But it's also not just, what's the word? Refresh? Maybe that's a little too heavy. I don't know.
Minor adjustment.
Update.
I don't think
Well,
so. I think an update is very
You
very
like
clean.
update?
Yeah, because and I think that it's also just a reassessment, of where we were to where we are now. I don't think it has to be overly complicated.
Okay, well, I
So-
hope you're right. And as much as I agree with the reassessment, reassessment can sound heavy. Update maybe sounds a little lighter. I don't know. You can think about it.
But I do think that in within the last 3 years, there has been, seismic shifts, right?
Oh.
So literally and
Yeah.
figuratively. So there is a seriousness to, right?
Okay, so I think we can all agree that we want to re-engage somebody, if
Yeah.
not HGA, somebody, maybe HGA, to do this update.
Update,
So-
yes. So,
Post-pandemic update.
If,
I like that. It's a post-pandemic update. It really is.
if I may, real quick, to your point, John, you will see an amendment for HGA for the ad services for this post-pandemic update on the board for October. That's how fast I'm trying to engage them. The other component of this is that there's a PowerPoint Candace I presented it to the previous facility subcommittee. Unfortunately, nobody, those board members are not, any of them are on this committee, but at that time there was politics driving from the Del Mar and from the city, and there were only 3 things on the plan, and it was basically we were looking at the pool, we were looking at the Lot 4 extension, and we were looking at the parking on the tennis courts. And those were the only 3 things that we were talking about at that time. And that's all we're talking about really today, too. We have no intention of re-going back through and looking at the full master plan from top to bottom. Most of that was being driven politically about adding, another structure, multi-story structure right on Del Mar. That was, I think even the board members were starting to get a little uneasy about that, especially with the political pressure that was coming from the neighborhood. The fact is that we did all the parking studies. The fact is we do need parking, and we've already lost one of the lots. We were losing 10 and 11, and we've already lost one of those lots, and we're going to have that impact. And so that whole presentation, which we can dust off and just share for reference, we went through all the parking stalls and how many we were going to lose and how many we needed to gain. And so, yes, it was a thoughtful process then. We just did not formalize it.
If I may suggest that, because we have new board members on the board, that, and I certainly defer to both my colleagues on the board too, if you think that it's a good idea to just have a study session, and so that it's high level.
More than this.
It's high level. I know that we're getting into, when we start to get into where we're going to build a pool is, and where the number of lots are. And I would just suggest take us through, where we've been, where we are,
we think we're going.
and then the post-pandemic update, what that's going to entail. And then it's also going to be a refresh for the community if this is going to be recorded and shared, and so that there's a real level of transparency in how we are going to move forward, especially with a new interim superintendent. And so it's more, I know I didn't want to use the word refresh, but it is like a post-pandemic update for the group.
Would you like to do that here first in terms of usually what we do is we sort of have a mini study session here and then collect feedback like, yeah, I would do this, that. We could prepare something for this group and then meet and then share out with your other colleagues.
I don't think that's necessarily necessary. I think.
I feel like this is a study session.
This is our study session in some
Okay,
ways.
okay.
I do think that could be also framed as, well, now we have a bond, so what's next? In terms of the actual project. We talked about CBOC, we talked about, operationalize it, of course, but now like what, I think that could be a combined conversation.
Okay.
And I'd be, I'm glad to hear that. I think maybe in first hearing, I misunderstood that, we're not just cutting the FMP and doing it.
No.
So I really appreciate that clarification. I think perhaps our next meeting, I would love to, and obviously this is just the beginning stages, I would love to kind of have a sense of, what are we thinking for the student services building? What are we thinking about that building that's going to be next to Seraphian? I would like to just kind of get a sense of where we're thinking about those pieces. Those pieces are from the actual master plan that we're not really changing, right? That we are doing, that we are moving forward those pieces. So I'd love to get kind of a sense of, what the thinking is at least there. I think that will maybe assuage us a bit to also know that, we're not, this is not completely shifting. We are still doing those pieces. The front, literally the front of the campus, those things are still moving forward. I had another point, I lost it, but that's part of my
I
thinking.
think it's wise to do a first pass from after you get this back here. It accomplishes a couple things. First off, it gives you all a chance to practice for the full board, which doesn't hurt.
Doesn't hurt.
A really important presentation. And second, kind of like we're getting here, there might be some considerations that's good to know before you go, because this is a little more relaxed, not quite so public. You don't have to listen to 20 speakers telling you the right answer before the presentation's even made, because that's the way the public comment works.
We are on air.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not saying it's not public.
Right.
It's just a more congenial environment for a first look and knocking off the rough edges on some things.
Would you consider having the HGA folks
Architect
here?
come in
Yes.
100%.
In
Yeah.
both
Oh, that'd be great.
sessions?
Sure.
Yeah,
Prefer to
They
Sure.
helped to lead the
Let's-
conversations
Last time.
originally, yeah, when we were working through facilities master plan.
we're not trying to hide it. We're just trying to refine it the best we can before we take it on the road for a larger
Yeah.
consideration. So it's like a dress rehearsal. in a way.
Richard and I will put our heads together in terms of like when we can kind of conceive of that first step study session with this group and then share that out.
And
Sure.
then with whatever ideas they come back with, or even before, again, back to this timeline that kind of simply parallels
Sure,
it,
okay.
so that we can not just leave the poor pool in limbo, but make a thoughtful decision on the best approach.
The pool being in limbo, what are we using the alternative right now?
Most of those, we just rent other facilities
Ah.
for now.
They're at Poly.
They're at Poly, because Poly used to come here.
And then Poly had their $70 million campaign, and they built their own pool.
Thank you.
Okay, that gets us to meeting schedule. Well, that's gonna be based on,
Yeah, let's.
It's gonna take, just full transparency, since we're just getting HGA re-engaged on your
Sure.
October 18th
Yeah,
board
yeah.
meeting, you'll be approving them. I would say probably December, because they're gonna need, once they get approved and we can start actually working with them, we can get some timelines from them.
yeah, so you just call it when,
Yeah, normally what I would say, as we're, gearing up, I can see this group meeting monthly. Right now, I would say every 2 months, and, as we're getting,
Yeah.
sort of up to speed in that presentation of, now we have our money, what now, kind of thing. I think that would help stage, how often this group is meeting. Just for your reference, our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, their next meeting is December 5th. So that might coincide actually well.
If we're gonna start meeting on a monthly basis, John, would you entertain having the meeting start at 5:30? The
yeah,
traffic.
well, whenever we
is-
meet again, we want it to be a time that you can make it.
Of
Yeah,
course,
it's,
of course.
my apologies for today,
okay.
I could tell it's back to school traffic.
You can
Yeah, well,
absolutely-
no, whenever we call the next meeting, it's
Yes.
gotta be timed everybody.
Great.
Okay, future agenda items.
Just that one thing I mentioned about loving to hear about,
I'm
what we're
sorry.
thinking, what we're thinking about the student services building and the building next to, so that we can.
Mhm.
Oh,
And the
you're
C-
talking about the signage.
Yeah, no, just into thinking about what's next there, what are we thinking in terms of what those buildings are going to be and how that, what stage are we in that?
It's
Yeah, I think
very
that's all
early,
part of
yeah.
I-
this
it's probably all
going
part of
forward.
it,
We are
I think
really
that's the
early,
big
but
part of
we'll-
it.
That's totally fine. I mean, if
Yeah.
it makes no sense to do it at that later stage, that's fine with me too, I just
Okay.
want to put
The
it out there.
CBOC update, does that go to the board or does it come to this committee?
That's its own committee, right?
Yeah, that's,
And then it
it's
just
not
goes to
under
the board.
college.
Yeah.
Yeah, the only thing that they report out, which they will send to you all, is if there's an issue, they have your contact information. If there's an issue related to any sort of spending questions, they are to give you all an annual report and then also their financials, or their, what we call an independent review of the bond piece, which the college will help to support that effort. But they don't have a formal
Yeah. 'Cause they're
reporting requirement to
Yeah,
the college
the-
because they constitute under.
In some ways,
Yeah,
what we're working on
Should go to them.
it's good to them.
almost goes to them more than what
Yes.
they're working on comes
That's
here,
us,
because
yeah.
their sole function is to make sure that whatever we are doing with the money is what the voter initiative says.
That's correct. And they just recently had their training. They've elected their chair and vice chair.
And who are they?
The chair is Bill Opal, and the vice chair is Brandon Lamar.
Okay, so I don't think there's any other future agenda items, because that's a big one. The one that we have is pretty big.
I recall the CBOC not having a vice chair, so is that a bylaws thing that we
We
have to?
did.
Okay.
They in the meeting, strongly suggested that they
Yeah.
had a vice chair. I am working on their
Perfect.
mini bylaw change for them to come back and say.
Great.
Because it's actually an administrative procedure.
Oh, that's easier then.
They wanted, they wanted some backup,
That makes
to,
sense.
but, if Dr. Opal couldn't be there, then,
Brandon.
yeah.
Okay.
And I recall that there was a presentation that was given on the CBOC from Blackstone. There was this gentleman who gave a really thorough overview and all that. Is there any plans to have them present what the role and all of that of the CBOC?
So they recently went through their training with our bond counsel, who did their role based on ed code. The recommendation would go, anything now that they have an elected chair, their agendas and are driven by that committee, so they actually told us what they want on their next agenda. They've asked for a sustainability sort of update. How is the bond language sort of speaking to that? And then the second piece that they asked for was just sort of, actually similarly, kind of a report out of what's the high level vision of how the timing sequencing is going to happen on campus. They weren't saying we want to, control it or be involved. We just want to be informed of what we should be expecting as expenses that are coming down the pike. They had a really good, robust conversation, meet and greet. They all showed up. I think we only had one member that was unable to attend, and then they elected their chair and vice chair.
So both of the officers were there?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yep. That is it.
Thank you.
I think that gets us to adjournment.
Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, done. So for the record, when I attended PCC, I had classes in bungalows.
Ooh.